Chapter 5. By me. Captain Arton walks into the room. He looks at each of us, then says to Ethan, Do we have everything? Ethan nods. We are ready to go, sir. Captain Arton walks over towards me as he says, Good. As he stands in front of me, he holds out a cloth-covered object. He explains, This belonged to your grandfather. Now it belongs to you. I pray that you never have to use it. But if so, I hope that it will save your life as it had saved the king's many times before. I took the object, whispering, Thank you. I stand there carefully unwrapping the dagger. The blade was wickedly sharp looking. As I turned it over in my hands, I noticed the handle had the shape of the arthropod carved into it. Captain Arton turns towards his men with his arms behind his back. He says, Today, we shall bring our princess home and hopefully bring peace to our land once more. With that, our small group started out of the ship and into the field outside of which consists of Captain Arton, Ethan, my 2 guards, and a man I had not met until today. Once outside, I am completely taken back by the sight of 5 huge wingless arthropods. I look at Ethan. You didn't say anything about those, I exclaim. Ethan gives me a reassuring smile, saying, There's nothing to fear. They are very safe, my lady. They will cut our journey in half. By nightfall, we will be on the other side of the forest and around the Arthenian's base. Besides, you will be riding with Captain Arton, and he is one of our best riders. With that, Ethan walks towards the creatures and climbs onto one. Captain Arton motions for me to join him. Reluctantly, I do. Ethan is right. There is nothing to fear. Tiger is a very gentle animal, he says as he pets the beast. He motions for me to do the same. Slowly, I reach my hand up to its furry chest. Tiger softly growls, lowering his head towards me in response. Captain Arton smiles at me. That means he likes you. I stand there looking up at the large animal, saying, I hate to know what he'd sound like if he didn't. Chuckling, Captain Arton climbs up onto the tiger's back. Offering me his hand, he says, Come on, we have a very long ways to go before nightfall, my lady. Ethan was right. By night, we had traveled all the way to the other side of the forest, which should have taken us several days on foot. The arthropods were unbelievably fast for their huge size. Captain Arton helps me down as the men release the arthropods. Captain Arton explains that they would be unable to take them the rest of the way. We will have to travel by foot up the back of the mountain. It overlooks the ocean. To most, it would be impossible to climb unless you knew the path to follow, he explains to me. The Arthenians do not guard it. They believe we would not risk it. He turns, saying, Men, we shall rest here for the night. Princess, after you eat, you should get some sleep. Ethan and I will take the first shift, then Carter and Henry would take the next. Captain Arton said, continuing to give out the night watch shifts to his men. I quickly fall asleep next to the warm fire. I roll over, staring up at the stars in the night sky, feeling wide awake. I had this strange, uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. I slowly sit up a little, just in time to see a figure jump out towards Captain Arton. I cry out, waking up the other sleeping men. They all jump up, grabbing their weapons. I grab my dagger from under my pillow and run behind the rocks where Ethan and Captain Arton had told me to hide if something like this were to happen. I quickly kneel down as I watch the men fight with each other. I felt completely helpless to help them or myself. I knew I had to do something to stop this, but what? That was the whole reason why I was on this planet, I thought to myself. I looked back over to where Captain Arton had been. The Arthenian soldier had him pinned to the ground. He was choking him to death. I looked around to see if anyone was going to help Captain Arton. But the other two Arthenians were managing to keep Ethan and the others very busy. I held the dagger tightly in my hand, and I quickly and quietly came up behind the Arthenian, grabbing him tightly by the hair like Ethan had showed me. I pressed the tip of my blade against the Arthenian's throat. I exclaimed, "Release him or I will kill you." I hoped that I sounded more confident than I felt. I thought to myself, he continues to choke the captain, wrapping my hand tighter in his hair. I then yanked his head back so that we made eye contact and growled, "Let him go now." I pressed the blade a little deeper. As I tried to ignore the drop of blood running down his neck, I whispered, "Please, I don't want to kill you, but I will if you leave me no choice." Looking into my eyes, the Arthenian glares at me, finally releasing Arton. The Arthenian looks back at Arton. He watches the man stand up. He says, "This isn't over, Arton. I will kill you." I look from the Arthenian to Captain Arton. Keeping a tight hold on the man, I ask, "Are you okay?" Captain Arton nods. Prince Carbola, I should have wrote an easier name to pronounce. Okay, Prince Caballero. Tell your men to put down their weapons and surrender now. As a gasp, Prince. Looking down at the men, I held my dagger to. From what I had learned about him, Prince Caballero was the most feared of all the Arthenians, for he was a great warrior. Swallowing hard, I tightened my grip on the knife, hoping they did not see my hand slightly shake. I sensed there was more going on between the two of them, and I was right. The prince said, "Don't think I have forgotten what you have done. You will pay with your life." Captain Arton sighs. "I was under orders to kill your father, Prince, which is, as we both know, I failed." I glanced from them back to the other men who were still fighting. Losing my patience, I said, "We don't have time for this. Tell your men to stop or I will." The prince said in a bored voice, "I know, you'll kill me." Then he said in the Arthenian language for his men to put down their weapons and surrender. The Garlanian soldiers then bound their unwelcome guest. Captain Arthenian checks to make sure they wouldn't be able to cut their bonds, then said, "You should rest, my lady. In the morning we shall begin our travels anew, along with our new pets." Placing his hands over my hand that still held the dagger, he said, "You did well, my lady. The king would have been very proud." Smiling at me, he went back to his men. I sat back down on my blanket with a strange feeling of being watched. I turned to find the prince studying me intently. I quickly turned my back on him, trying to shake the uneasiness I was feeling. Slipping my hand under my pillow, I squeezed the handle of the knife tightly in my hand. I closed my eyes, falling slowly back to sleep. Nothing could have prepared me for how the Arthenians looked, or the power and anger that oozed off of them like it was touchable. Prince Caliber was the most handsome man I had ever seen, as well as the most dangerous. The fact that I had held a knife to his throat and lived through it, had me wondering if he had, for some reason, allowed me to get away with it. No, shaking my head, that's crazy. Not to mention scary. Why would he even do such a thing? I asked myself. I slowly look over at him as he sits leaning against the tree that he was tied to. He is tall, at least 6 foot tall. He had gray skin and dark eyes that were like the depths of the ocean where his people live. His hair went past his shoulders and had braids, which held his hair back out of his eyes. I stared at a pair of full, kissable lips that had my heart working overtime. Our eyes met, and suddenly I had to look away. Good grief, what was wrong with me? I was not no teenager, and he definitely wasn't the first attractive man I've ever seen before in my life. If I'm going to be the Garlanian leader, I cannot start lusting for an Arctanian, I thought to myself. Shaking my head, I stand up and start stretching my sore muscles. I try very hard to ignore the fact that he is watching me. I grab my dagger, placing it on my belt. Then I began rolling up my bags. Ethan hurries over, declaring, "Allow me, my lady." I smile at him, replying, "Ethan, I am perfectly capable of doing this myself. Thank you." Shooing him away after I was done, I walked over to the smoldering fire to have something to eat. I noticed that there was still a good bit of food left over and that no one had fed the prisoners. I watched Ethan stand up and approach the pot. Picking it up, he starts to empty the pot while glaring at the Arthanians. Grabbing hold of his arm, I asked, "Wait, Ethan, what are you doing?" I lower my voice as he paused and stand beside me. I ask, "Has anyone fed the prisoners? They may be our enemy, but we don't have to be cruel, Ethan." He looks at me, replying, "They would, my lady. They would, my lady. And they have in the past. Things they have done to our people." He trails off. I look at him, sighing. We would be no better than them if we treat them so. Besides, one of us has to take the first step towards peace. I turn, pouring food into several bowls. Ethan reluctantly helps me take the food to the Arthanians. I watch with little surprise as they each refuse the food. One of the Arthanians quickly spits on the ground to make his point. Another saying he would rather slit his own throat than eat our food. The guard who was handing him his food starts to grab his knife, saying, "I would be happy to assist you." I yell at them all, "Stop this." I glare at the prince, who was just sitting there in silence. I ask, "Is hate the only thing your people feel? Can you not accept kindness when it is offered to you? Or is cruelty and pain the only thing your people know?" We glared at each other for a short time. Then the prince grabs a plate as he says to his men, "Eat. We will need our strength for when we escape." Doing as the prince commands, they take the food. Ethan turns, walking away, growling, "This is a mistake."